been extraordinary. And I have nothing but gratitude, you, Kim, for being an incredible interviewer, for giving me room to share with all these people what I do in my life. And for, I mean, it's been incredible. I would do it again. Just invite me and I will be here. That's how
Okay.
good it was.
Welcome to the show. I'm so happy you're here. You are going to be so happy you're here. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm a speaker, I'm a writer. I get to do a lot of fun things in life, but my favorite thing to do is to meet people. And I get to meet some absolutely extraordinary people. Today, Stuart is on my show. And I'll tell you, in researching him and getting to know who he is without him even knowing I'm getting to know who he is, I
Hmm.
am amazed by him in so many ways. I've so been looking forward to this conversation. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I know I'm going to get a lot out of it, but it's all about love and peace and gratitude and good things in life. And Stuart's got quite a story on what led him to where he is today. And so we're going to dive in. Stuart, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I mean, thank you. This is wonderful, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so Stuart, before we dive into all the other stuff, I really want people to get to know you. So I would like to hear about 8-year-old Stuart.
Well, well, I can begin when I was very young. Um, I went through some rather traumatic experiences when I was 16 years old that completely changed my life. Um, I was in Florida with my mother and my sister on vacation when we got a phone call that my father was very sick in the hospital. Excuse me. And we flew back to New York, went to the hospital. My father was lying in bed with 106 fever. He didn't recognize my mother, my sister, or myself. He spent an entire week that we were with him there just shaking in bed, not knowing where he was, who he was. It was very traumatic for me. I was, 16. I never experienced anything like it. Just before he died, I went into his hospital room, and my father was lying in a state of total serenity. I had never seen anything like it before. I could look into his eyes and I could look 1,000 miles. The whole room was full of energy, of this kind of peaceful, remarkable energy. Even light was in the room. And I took his hand and I said, Dad, do you know who I am? And he shook his head, yes. So I got up, went out to the hospital corridor, and I met his nurse by accident. And she told me something that changed my life. She said, to her experience, and she worked in a ward where people were dying all the time. When people, just before they die, they go into a state of total serenity. It's like they have let go of all of everything. And they're just, you can look in their eyes, you can see forever. There's calm, it's the kind of energy that, she said, and I said to myself after I heard this, why did my father have to live 49 years to experience this serenity 2 hours before he died? And it completely changed my life. I mean, I was a pretty good basketball player when I was younger, and I was hoping to get scholarships and this and that, and go to college and become a doctor, lawyer, some professional. I started getting into Buddhism, Hinduism, reading at 16, reading books about all this stuff, reading books about healing, about mystical things, books on religion, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas. And I started looking, I knew I was too confused. I was too introverted. I was too just congested with my own tension to do this for myself. I had to find somebody who can truly teach me how to do this. And I started traveling all over the world practically, Europe, Africa. I was always on my way to India. I was, to look for a Swami, to look for somebody who could teach me how to get my mind to shut up, how to get my emotions to calm down, how I can get my sexual energy, manage my sexual energy and get it quiet inside me. And I spent 9 years looking for this person. And of course, the absurdity of it all is I found him in my hometown. You know, I was in Paris and I was broke. And I called up a friend of mine and I said, Charlie, can you send me a ticket back to America? I got to get back to the States. I'm broke. And he sent me a ticket. I picked it up at the American Express literally the next day. And I flew back to America. I was living on the floor of this friend of mine's apartment. And he said to me one early evening, he said, let's go out and have some dinner. I said, great idea. There was a kind of Mideastern restaurant we used to like in Greenwich Village. And so we're walking on 7th Avenue South. And we come to an Oriental art shop, which I had walked past at least 500 times. And we're looking in the window, and there's wonderful Buddhas and Tibetan paintings and, Hindu sculpture and really kind of museum stuff. And my friend said to me, why don't we go in there? You love this stuff. And I did. I tell you, once I walked into an exhibition of Tibetan art in a place called the Riverside Museum, which I don't even think exists anymore. And they had a whole exhibition of Tibetan tankas. And I felt like I found my family. I felt like I had found old relatives when I saw these paintings. Anyway, I said, Charlie, I'm broke. What am I going to do in there? And he said to me something I'll never forget. It doesn't cost to look. We walked in the door, and standing in the middle of this Oriental Asian antique store was a man. There was light around him, and the energy coming out of him was exactly the energy I saw when my father died. Deep inner peace, but strength, a real serenity about him, and a power about him. And like a magnet, I was attracted to him. I didn't see anything else in the shop. I was just boom. And he started showing me pictures of himself studying in India, him lying at the foot of a Swami with a picture of Swami Nityananda superimposed in his heart. And this became very important in my life because Swami Nityananda became like a spiritual godfather, a spiritual grandfather for me. And he said to me, if you want to study with me, come back here tomorrow. And as I was walking out of his gallery, I turned around and saw him, and it was the exact energy I had seen in my father's room just before he died. This power, this serenity, this peace, this having surrendered everything. Yet this man had the capacity to live in the world and yet be free of the world at exactly the same time. I said to Charlie, I got to go back and see this guy. I said, I don't know what happened there. you know. So we went out and had dinner. We went back to Charlie's apartment. He was living in a tenement on 21st Street in Chelsea when Chelsea was kind of a slum. Today it's an upscale neighborhood, but then it was a slum. And you had a bathtub in the kitchen, a railroad flat, toilet in the hall, one of those places you lived in the 60s when you left your family's home and you wanted to start out and live your life. I know because I had lived in the building before. And we're walking up the stairwell and we meet a guy named Ed Borden. And I knew Ed because I had lived there, not as a friend, but just, hello, how are you? He was a neighbor. And he said, why don't you come into my apartment for a cup of tea? So he said, great. So we walked into his apartment. And as I sit here and breathe, he had like a $500,000 Oriental art collection in this tenement apartment.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I looked around, I said, where did you get all this stuff? He said, there's a guy in Greenwich Village named Rudi, who was the man I had just met an hour before in that Oriental art gallery, where I got all these things. And I said, Stuart, the gods are talking to you. This was no accident. You have to listen. I went down the next day to meet him 5 o'clock in the afternoon, showed me the meditation technique, the breathing exercise he taught. And I walked across Manhattan with him to my first meditation class. And the most extraordinary thing about it, it was exactly what I was looking for. I was born, literally in the tenements of the Bronx, Southeast Bronx, and it was a slum. It wasn't really a slum, but it was getting there. It was getting to that kind of. And the idea of living in a monastery, the idea of living in an ashram, although I ran an ashram for 8 years, but the idea of, sequestering myself in places where I kind of hiding out from life, it never set well for me. I always thought I need somebody to teach me how to embrace life, how to open to life, how to recognize that life is this extraordinary teacher. And the only thing was missing was my inner strength to allow myself to be taught by it. And I spent 6 years studying with this man. And in that period of time, he taught me how to build a system that was capable of doing what I just mentioned. How to be, where to go inside. It wasn't just love, peace, and eat vegetables. You know, where to go inside yourself, where the foundation is, how to open and develop the foundation in yourself, how to get rooted inside and build that kind of inner strength that can allow the heart to open and stay open, how the mind to get quiet and to stay quiet. And after I studied with him for 6 years, and then the second, this was really traumatic. He and I and two of his students were going to upstate New York because he was invited to teach at a commune up there. And we're flying, and we suddenly got lost in a fog. We could barely see 10 feet in front of us. And Kim, we hit a mountain.
Mhm.
We hit a mountain. And I was knocked unconscious. And when I woke up, the pilot told me that Rudi had passed on, my teacher. I tried to give him artificial respiration. I tried everything. And when I finally realized, yes, he had taken his samadhi, he had really gone to be with God, took his final breath on the earth. The first thought I had was thanking him for allowing me to be with him the last moment of his life.
Mhm.
The last moment of his life, I was holding his hand when we hit the mountain. I heard the pilot scream out, "Oh my God." And we hit that mountain. And his soul force came into me. And that's the only reason I survived that airplane crash. And I said, Stuart, now you'll find out what you learned in the last 6 years. Now you'll find out whether you can take this amazing teaching that you were given and truly apply it practically to your life. Now you'll discover why you're living a living miracle. I mean, who survived something like this?
Right.
I used to look in the mirror and see a miracle. Still look in the mirror and see a miracle. And this is what 50 years ago when this happened.
Mm.
And I had to grow. I had to work on myself in such a profound way that it taught me how to open to whatever life is there to teach me. And Rudi started that. When I was a kid, one of the things I always had a big problem with running a business, making money. I would make enough money to live and I would survive that way. I wanted to be a writer. I was writing lots of poetry. I didn't got into prose yet, but a lot of poetry. And I would live in museums studying art, music. I would, all my friends were going to discotheques and I was listening to Bach. I mean, it was unbelievable. They were going out and dancing and whatever they were doing. And I would stay home and listen to Mozart and Bach and Beethoven and, great composers and absorbing that level of music. Not that I even understood it, but I knew it was something of a higher nature. I remember I once read an article about Bach that really just blew my mind. He was dying, right? And all his disciples and his students and loved ones were all around him crying and lamenting. And he said to them something so amazing that he said, "Why are you all so sad? I'm just going to where the music comes from."
Mm.
It was extraordinary. And that's where I wanted to go, where the music comes from. But I wanted it in my life to live as creatively as possible and to allow myself to truly experience the uniqueness of my own creativity, but not through my ego, not through my charisma, not through my mind and what I thought was right or wrong in life, but living in a state of depth and surrender that allow spiritual energy to flow through and guide my life. And in the period of time, I've written, I don't know, a dozen books. I published 9 of them already, and all kinds of subjects. I mean, I used to run a, I had a student, I had 2 students who wanted to move to Nepal. And this is a great story. And they asked me about it. I said, yeah, sounds great to me. I'd love to visit you there. It'd be fantastic. I had another student of mine who was teaching in San Francisco the meditation that I trained her in. And I called her up and I said, how would you like to move to Nepal? And she said, yes. I mean, really, just with one phone call. And she said, yes, I would love to do this. So I said, great. I told them the 2 people that were moving there and just, we'll get you a ticket and you go and you start a meditation center in Kathmandu. So she was there for about a month and she calls me up one day. She says, Stuart, I love this place. It's so exotic. I don't know what to do during the day. So I said, look, you're in one of the poorest countries in the world. Something is going to come. I promise you. 2 days later, she calls me up. Stuart, I went to a meeting at the United Nations, she said to me, and the meeting was about the trafficking of young girls from Nepal into India. I mean, she said 10-year-old kids, 12-year-old kids, they go to the hinterlands of Nepal, they buy these children for a couple of $100s, and they bring them to Mumbai, to Falkland Road, to I don't know if you know anything about Falkland. It's one of the most horrible places in the world.
Mm.
And they sell these kids into slavery. So I said, Chris, that's our job. We have to set up a safe house and work with doctors and NGOs in order to find these children. And instead of having them being sold into slavery, we'll take them, raise them, feed them, send them to school, give them a life. We started doing this thing. We did it
Mm.
for 4 years. And then Chris called me up one day and she said, Stuart, she said, I'm very sick. Kathmandu is a very polluted place. I mean, I've been there many times and you can hardly breathe sometimes. The pollution is so bad. And she
Mm.
was getting emphysema. So I said, Chris, give the Bahini Foundation, which was our foundation, give it to a doctor we knew in Kathmandu who ran an organization called Rest. And tell her that you want to give it, that you have to leave, you're getting sick, and we want to give you the Bahini Foundation. And this sent chills through me. She said, we gave the foundation to Aruna. And I don't know, 8 years later, I wrote this book called Little Sisters. And Aruna got in touch with me. She was all upset. She said, Stuart, how could you write a book about this? The ba, da, 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 da. I said, Aruna, read it. Read it. So she read the book. She called me back, Stuart. I cried throughout this entire book. Thank you.
Mm. Mm.
I wrote a novel that was based on, it starts out in a penthouse on Central Park West and winds up in the heart of darkness, in a brothel. And it's a family story, it's a love story, but it takes you on a voyage into the darkest elements of this kind of human trafficking thing. And I knew I could only write this as a novel because if I tried to do a documentary like this, I would have gotten killed,
Mm.
you know? And it was called Little Sisters. And then there are books on spiritual. Just finished one called Rudra Meditation, Transforming Life's Tensions into Joy and Love. That's the most recent book that I published just a couple of months ago. So it all came from building an inner life that enabled me to open and allow this creative force in the universe to guide my life. Because I knew that this energy was much wiser than I was. And it had so much power and wisdom and enabled me to see what's real, what's an illusion, where to invest my time and energy, even with people, where to invest time and energy. And it also enabled me to learn from anybody who comes into my life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and the ugly. God is love.
Mm,
And we have to get strong enough. It's like a covenant we make. We're born here to learn, to transform our suffering into joy and love. Once we learn that, we have attained a state of enlightenment. We have worked through our karma.
mm,
Transforming suffering into joy and love. That's the purpose of being born here. And we all have different karma and different things. We're lawyers, doctors, we're this, we're that, we're, writers, we have podcasts, we all have different karmas, you know? And but all of it is a product of creative energy. And when we learn to use that creative energy for our own benefit in growing and becoming more highly evolved as a human being. And then to share that with other people, to recognize that, every human being comes to the earth to learn this. They do it in one lifetime, or they do it in 50 lifetimes, or they do it in 1,000 lives. Ultimately, the soul has to evolve to a place where it embraces the fact that God is love. And everything that we see and do and live with every day is a manifestation of higher energy. It's a reflection of God, or whatever one wants to call it, higher energy, God, spirit. I'm really not a theologian, so I never get into those kind of conversations with people. But it's a higher force in the universe. And our job is to build an inner life that enables us to do this. I learned how to do this by learning how to develop what's called a chakra system inside myself, learning where to go in myself to develop the foundation, the core, the real power inside myself. Then how to open the heart, because the heart will stay open if you're grounded. The heart is like a tree, like a flower. It needs a stem and roots. And if it's not being nurtured, it just withers, the
mm.
heart. So we need to have that inner power, that strength, how to keep the mind quiet. Because when the mind is quiet, we begin to receive real knowledge and wisdom. The higher forces in the universe they just open to give us all this wisdom. We block it up. I always tell my students, say, look, spirit is pure. But when it comes into people, it becomes this and that and the other, dark and evil. And, but the spirit itself is pure. We transform it into all this madness that goes on in the world.
Mm.
So our job is to fix us, is to fix us. And as we fix ourselves, that spirit can flow through us. And there becomes love and compassion and forgiveness and patience and all of these words that we're taught from the time we're 3 years old that are so hard for people to deal with and live by. But it all becomes possible if we have the system inside to allow this energy to flow through us in a pure way.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. All right. So you just said so much just now, and it's all so good. Um, Surviving the plane crash, that had to be a moment of, all right, I'm here for more of a reason than I even knew. And so you got to do something with it. I would think anytime something like that happens to somebody, you would come to a place where it would be like, or why did I survive? What is my purpose? Why of all the people, everybody else passed away, but I'm still here. I survived this. So what's the meaning of it? And then you took that and you made something incredible from it. And the number of people you've been able to help and mentor and teach, and through your books, through your teachings, through everything from that moment on, it just has been astounding. And I love what you're saying. Yeah, God is love. God is love. I mean, if you're a Bible reader, it says it right in John. God is love, those exact words. And that is what God is. And and so we're created in his image. So that means we're love, or we should
Right.
be. That's how we should be walking and talking and living and giving and breathing, is through the energy of love, because that's what we are, because we're created in his image and he is love. So it makes sense that we are love. But there seems to be a huge block when it comes to actually living love.
Mm.
I personally think part of it is a lack of understanding. People, because there's so many things about love, the word love, that is thrown around, things that we're taught about love that are not love, have absolutely nothing to do with love, but it's what has been demonstrated to us as love. So how do you see that? Because to me, I see that as like step one is actually understanding what love actually is.
Well,
And
how I
yeah,
see it is very simple. Look, if you want to be a doctor, you have to get 12 years of training. Otherwise you're dangerous. If you want to be a lawyer, you have to get training. If you want to be a carpenter, a plumber, if you want to airline pilot, whatever you take up, and you've got to get training. The only person we never think that needs training is ourselves. And we are the most complicated thing on earth, each and every one of us. We are mysteries to ourselves. We have, and I always say the only person anybody is up against to find what you just asked about is themselves. We have to learn how to do it. And then we have to say, well, who's going to teach me this? And there's an old saying, when a student is ready, the guru will be there. And I
mhm.
really believe that, because when I walked past my teacher's store 500 times and I never went in. I was ready. I was more than ready. Trust me, what I had been through just before I met him, you don't want to even hear about, what I had been through. And I was ready to learn. It was Stuart, either you're going to have to learn how to get free of your insanity, or you're going to have to commit yourself to a sanitarium. You're going to have to commit yourself to some crazy house where the doctors are going to take care of you. I was ready to listen to somebody else. I said, you have listened to yourself all these years and you've made yourself crazy. Maybe there's somebody who has a little bit more wisdom than you that can guide you in your. Then it's the beginnings of getting that training, the training that I got from my teacher, Rudi. I mean, he was kind of amazing. I'll never forget. I was studying with him for 4 years, and he made me a teacher of our work, of the work that I do. And one day he asked me, a group of young people in Texas wanted to start a meditation center there. And they called him and said, it's nuts here. There's too much tension. We need somebody to teach. So he sent me down to Texas. It was the last place. I mean, I lived in Paris, I lived in London, I lived all over the world. He sent me to Denton, Texas to do this. And he said, I want you to go for 3 weeks. So I said, okay. And the day before, just before I left, he took me aside and he said, Stuart, if anybody ever asks you who and what the guru is, you tell them the guru is life. And the humility of it was extraordinary to me. But it took me 10 years more to truly learn that lesson of working on myself up against almost impossible circumstances, often working on myself. I went there and then he came down to visit me about 6 months later. We're
So
driving in
so
the
so much for 3 weeks.
yeah, we're driving in the country there, and I said, Rudi, it's been a hell of a 3 weeks. And he looked at me and he said, you're on your fourth day. And I suddenly realized how the earth was created in 7 days, you know? And it took me 9 years to work out 3 weeks. When I finally arrived at a place where there was nothing more I could do in that situation. And I tell you, I left a very big situation. I had a drop dead house I built there. I had businesses. I had, all kinds of restaurants and candy business, all kinds of things. An antique business. One day I looked around, I said, Stuart, if you stay here, he said, your growth will stop. Your spiritual growth will stop. You will become satisfied. And and I just told everybody I have to move back to New York. I said to him, if you can do this in New York, you can do it anywhere in the world. I said to myself, and also I had a teacher, I met a great teacher in India. And it was a very interesting story because I was in Darjeeling with one of my students, and we met some Tibetan lamas. And we asked them to take us to all the Rinpoches in town. We wanted to meet all the Rinpoches. So they took us from monastery to monastery to monastery. And we would sit with these Rinpoches, and I basically didn't feel any energy or any kind of teachings from them. And they said, well, there's one more monastery we have to go to. We went to a place called Sanada, maybe 10, 12 kilometers from Darjeeling. And there were about a couple of hundred lamas sitting in the courtyard with prayer wheels and Om Mani Padme Hum with their beads. And I said to this guy who came up to us, I said, he spoke English. I said, can we see the Rinpoche? Oh, Rinpoche is very sick. Rinpoche is too sick to see anybody. He's in bed. I said, look, we've come 9,000 miles. Can you go ask him? Maybe he'll see us. So the guy came back with this really surprised look on his face, and he said, Rinpoche said he will see you.
Mm.
So we went into his room, and he was lying in bed with a blanket up to his neck. And he really looked like he maybe had 3, 4 weeks to live, Rinpoche. And this, we gave him, a sign of greeting is you bring a white scarf, silk scarf, as an offering to a teacher. So we gave him a white silk scarf and we sat down and I started practicing the meditation I learned from Rudi, my teacher. And I asked him, I said, Rinpoche, can you talk about Tibetan Buddhism? Rinpoche went on for an hour
Mm.
talking about Tibetan Buddhism. When he was finished, this was all through a translator. When he got finished, I said, can we come back tomorrow? And he said, yes. So we came back the next day. Rinpoche was sitting in his robes on his bed. And we sat there, gave him the white scarves. We sat down and said, Rinpoche, can you talk about Tibetan Buddhism? And he again went on for about an hour talking. I asked him again, Rinpoche, can we come back again and see you tomorrow? And he said, yes. On the way out of this monastery, this student of mine had read a book about the 6 disciplines of Naropa, specifically the discipline of Tumo. And Tumo is very similar to the kind of practice I learned from my teachers, vase, breathing into the area right below the navel, the third chakra. The Chinese call it the Ta Tian, the Japanese the Hara. It's the real power inside a human being. So I said, okay, now I have, this is what they call this Tibetan yoga, Tibetan tantric yoga, actually. And I next day I went back. Rinpoche was dressed in full teaching regalia, sitting on a throne chair. And this guy literally was dying 2 days ago. Anyway, we gave him the scarves. We sat down. I said, Rinpoche, can you talk about the 6 disciplines of Naropa, specifically the discipline of Tumo? Went on for 3 hours.
Mm.
The Lama who was translating said to me, in 13 years of being in the monastery, he never heard these teachings. He said,
Wow.
incredible story. So at the end, I asked him, Rinpoche, I'm thinking about moving back to New York. I said, can you give me any advice on that? And he said, yes, you have to move back to New York because if you live in New York, your teachings will be known all over the world. That's what he told me. And what everything, not that I wanted my teachings all over the world, but it confirmed what I knew I had to move on in order to. I left an extraordinary situation, Kim. We had like a Japanese, it was a whole, beautiful house that looked like a Chinese Tibetan temple, Japanese gardens. I mean, it was, businesses. And I finally announced to everybody, I have to leave. told him, and I left a student of mine in charge of the place. And I left. I went back to, I started all over again. Within 2 years, I was teaching all over the world, just as that Rinpoche said. And the incredible capper to this story, right? I was in San Francisco giving a talk to a yoga society there. And one of my students comes up to me and says, "You got to speak to them. You're not going to believe what this guy is going to tell you." So I went over and he started telling me, Kala Rinpoche. Kala Rinpoche was the name of the Rinpoche I had met. And I discovered that Kala Rinpoche was like on the level of the Karmapa, the Dalai Lama. He was on that level in the Tibetan hierarchy, you know?
Wow.
And Kala Rinpoche was dying. And these two seekers came from the West. It's a true story. I mean, it's unbelievable. These two seekers came from their need for a spiritual life was so strong that it brought him back to life again.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Kala Rinpoche also told me something that I'll never forget. When he was a young tulku in Tibet, and he had a question to ask his Rinpoche, he said he would have to wait hours because so many lamas had questions about this. He said, "Today I can't find anyone to teach."
Oh,
And my teacher used to say the same thing. He said, my Rudi would say it in his wonderful Brooklyn way. A teacher is a cow. If you don't milk a cow, the cow is going to scream into the night and die. A teacher has to be milked. You have to make the effort to get the wisdom, the knowledge, to make the teacher work on himself. And Kala Rinpoche had the same problem. And this is a very big problem today. People with wisdom have to be milked. People with knowledge have to be milked. They have so much to offer the world, and everybody takes them for granted. They don't realize that all the accidents that happen when they meet people like this, they're not accidents. They're opportunities to learn and to grow.
oh my word. Stuart, I can't tell you what that just meant to me, what you just said. I'm actually starting an organization with a good friend of mine, John Suzuki, who had this idea 5 years ago, and now it's going to come to fruition. And it's all about what you just said. You just summed it up, that people with the wisdom, they need to be milked. And the greatest wisdom in our country are people who are older, who have lived experience, who have gained wisdom through living through their lives, and yet they also identify as lonely and forgotten and kind of rejected from society, just kind of put in a home, and there they go to die. And we should be tapping into that knowledge, that wisdom. And so the organization that we're starting is to do that, to take people like you, like so many people who are just full of wisdom. I don't know if there's a better word for it, but that should be passed on to younger people. And so that's what our organization is we're taking people and then pairing them up with younger people for them to share their wisdom and share their knowledge. And so man, that was just perfect. What you just said was just absolutely confirming and perfect, just confirmation that we're doing the right thing, that this
Well,
is
if anything
something
I
that
can
should
help,
be done.
I can contribute anything to that. You just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do it. No
Oh,
problem.
that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. I will be tapping you for that. I promise you. So thank you for the offer. Yeah. And so here you are, um, and you achieved this inner peace while living. So not waiting like your dad did, seeing it in your dad. What a moment that had to be. But seeing it in your dad and then wanting it so badly, recognizing it in your dad, first of all. I don't know that everybody is open enough to recognize a moment like that, but you recognized it. And then you're like, well, how can I live with this rather than wait till my deathbed? And because of that moment, I mean, to see what really your dad brought you, the gift your dad gave you that has led to where you are today, and how many, who knows, thousands of people you've helped in this life because of it. It's astounding. I mean,
Well,
your
it's
story
true.
is
I
incredible.
always call my father, he's my first guru.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
20 minutes before he died, he became my first guru, my
Yeah.
first spiritual teacher, changed my life, and you're right, it's extraordinary. And everybody goes through this. Everybody has trauma, difficulty, they can tell you stories that break you. I mean, there's no novel written that goes deeper than the stories that any human being can tell you about their life, and it's true. But people don't recognize that these things happen to them as a reminder, first of all, that they're not going to be living here forever. Their lives are transient. We born, we live, we die. There's nobody alive from the 17th century. We
Right.
all come and go. Why are we born? And what do we do while we're here? Is it just making money?
Mhm.
You know, is it just power, success, all this nonsense in politics and people destroying each other? That's not it. We're born here to learn to be happy people. And
Mhm.
everything in life points in that. Why do we make money? It's supposed to make us happy.
Mhm.
Why do we have success? It's supposed to make us happy. Why do we get married? It's supposed to make us happy. Yet 75% of all people in this country get divorced. Why do
Right.
why do we do everything we do is supposed to make us happy? Why do we have a great wardrobe? Why do we, whatever we do, buy a house? And yet, the one place we never find that really deep happiness is inside ourselves because we do not gain the knowledge of how to do it. And that really, once we get that, then money becomes a joy. We can use it to give life. Well, our families, our friends, with me, with the meditation practices that I do, it's life. It gives life. And I think that all of this is about training, learning how to overcome the one person that we have to overcome in order to find these things ourselves. And
Mhm.
we can't do that in our minds because the mind will analyze everything, figure it out, and take us nowhere. The
Mhm.
emotions is like quicksand, it's like a swamp. And the real place that it has to go is love. And to get to love, we got to swim through a swamp. But we need to have training in order to keep the heart open, quiet the mind, have foundation, grounding inside ourselves, learning how to use sexual energy. I mean, sexual energy is the best way to put it is this: every human being has a male female principle in him. In religion, it's Jehovah, Shekhinah, it's Shiva and Shakti, it's Uma Maheshwara. There's always the male female union. We all have the male female aspects in us. We have to learn to unify them. The male female aspect is unified in the sexual area of a human being. And that marriage of masculine, yin and yang, masculine and feminine, it gives birth to the Kundalini force. Kundalini is the energy that, that really takes you to a state of spiritual enlightenment. So it's the wholeness in ourself that enables us to attain spiritual enlightenment. The proper and conscious use of sexual energy enables us to build that wholeness inside ourselves. It also transforms all of the human elements into something spiritual.
Mhm.
So all of this exists inside a human being. We as people are born here to learn, depending upon the religion we're in. My way isn't the only way, but we have to learn how to unify all these opposing forces that exist inside us and create a oneness inside and a wholeness inside ourselves. That allows the heart to stay open, and that allows us to experience God as love
Mhm.
because we have become whole inside. There's no longer all this conflict and who's right and who's wrong and male, female fighting each other and all this stuff that goes on in the world. It's a wholeness, it's a oneness that enables people to truly keep the heart open, to truly receive wisdom and knowledge flowing from the universe, to truly use that energy to literally, the sexual energy, to give birth to themselves, to give birth to a
Wow.
force that's going to bring them spiritual enlightenment.
Hmm. So interesting. That's so interesting because I've never heard it said that way, or I've never really heard that before. But it's so true. People call it different things. That people say self-love, is something that's kind of battered around and battered around, because some people are like, oh, it's about ego, it's about whatever. No, I mean, my belief about self-love, wholeness, recognizing that you are enough, you are complete the way you are. You're created in his image and perfectly, just the way you are. And once you accept that and receive that, your life becomes a beautiful thing. Because when you can truly love yourself and be grateful, have gratitude for who you are and your own special uniqueness, then you can really love other people. Then love can be a part of your life. Before that, it's awfully hard to love other people if you can't look in the mirror and go, man, I love the person I'm seeing and feel great about the person I'm seeing. And it sounds to me like what you're saying and that are kind of the same thing, or part of at least the same
They
thing.
are the same thing. But I'm adding only one dimension to this. You have to learn how to do it.
Mm.
Just
Yeah.
reading it in a book, memorizing it, knowing that it doesn't work. You have to learn how to build an inner life that is strong enough to do what we're talking about here. Because that, look, there are three things that I teach that are part of three elements to what I teach. First one is we all have karma, the objective world, living in life, acting in life, dealing with positive and negative and all the rigmarole of life. We have to learn how to work out our karma. You work out your karma by getting your heart open, by allowing yourself to interact with life with patience, compassion, love, forgiveness. In order to do this, you have to, first of all, really, like you said, really learn to like and love yourself. I am worthy of having an amazing life. An amazing life isn't being worth $300 trillion. An amazing life is living with love, happiness, with the real treasure that the world has to offer us. So the first thing is karma. We need to learn how to live here and to live here with an open heart. Second thing is higher energy. Higher energy is not some sweet hors d'oeuvre. Higher energy is very powerful stuff. I mean, in the Bhagavad Gita, I quote this a lot because it's really interesting. When Krishna reveals himself to Arjuna, it's as if the light of 1,000 suns suddenly appears in the sky. This energy is all of life, it's all of death, it's all of thousands of lives and deaths merging in one force that is infinite energy in the universe. And in order to receive that energy, in its purified form, we need to be really strong inside. Otherwise, it's just going to burn us up. It's too strong. And the third element is the Kundalini force. And this element is the pathway to enlightenment. It's also a very powerful energy force. And in order to activate Kundalini, we need to be grounded inside. To be grounded inside means we have to learn how to develop chi, the chakra below the navel. All of the martial arts is based on chi. People who learn the power when they do, Aikido or karate or Tai Chi, it's always about the development of chi, balance, foundation, rootedness, power. I once had I used to know this guy. He was had 6 black belts or something in martial. He was a master of martial arts, this guy. And I was walking down the street with him one day and I said to him, the greatest martial artists, the greatest ones, will never get into a fight. And he looked at me and he said, how do you know this? I said, the chi would be so powerful that anybody that was coming with some anger, their anger would dissolve right in front of the martial. Just the chi would dissolve their anger. And he said, "You're right. The greatest martial artists never get into a fight. The anger, coming, it just dissolves. It dissolves. And you got to bring a flower. You got to bring love. You got to bring it because that's what you're getting from this person, you know?
Mhm.
Anyway, it's the first thing my teacher ever taught me was bring the focal point of your attention to the chakra below the navel. Told me the mind is the most powerful instrument you have, and also is a thing that's driving everybody crazy. So you've got to learn how to use this instrument. It's almost like a surgical instrument that you use and focus it just below the navel, and it will open the core of your being. And then when you use your breath properly, the breath will expand and develop the chakras. My Rudi used to call the chakra system psychic muscles. He said, if you don't develop your physical muscles, they're going to atrophy. If you don't develop the psychic, they're going to atrophy. So all of meditation is not about having a spiritual life. All of meditation is about learning how to become a human being. It's just a craft. I tell people it's not a religion, it's not a cult, it's a craft. And by learning and mastering this craft, you learn how to keep your heart open and to live in a world with its quiet, serenity, love, compassion for other people, their problems. And I think to me, this was an amazing thing to learn when I was younger. I said, my God, Stuart, he is teaching you exactly what you were looking for. You went half around the world to find this man, and you found him literally, it's like a book. You found him in your hometown. You know?
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Isn't that, yeah, yeah, yeah. I always think, God is kind of cool that way, that you just don't know what door you're going to open and who's going to be behind it, or what's going to come into your life, and you can be amazed by it. And it's, to me, it's just, God is kind of cool that way.
No, I tell you, if you pardon me, I'll tell you another story, like in front of your nose. When I was living in Texas, I was building a situation there, and the practical involvement was we were self-supporting. We were not going to be a burden on the community. We were going to build businesses in an honest way and work as a group of people. And we did it. We had a fantastic restaurant. We had a bakery. We had a candy business. We had, a contracting business. Very successful situation. In fact, the Chamber of Commerce once called me up and said, Stuart, how would you like to sponsor the Miss Denton contest? I mean, this is this group of kids living in a commune. How would you like the ashram to sponsor the Miss Denton? And the Miss Denton contest was a very important thing in that town because I think two Miss Americas came from Denton, Texas. So it was like a big deal, And they called us up. I said, well, what about the Chamber of Commerce? They said, well, they can't do it this year. You think? So we did it. We threw a parade. We had crafts fairs. We had one of the Miss America's mothers came and we had this big fashion show. It was fantastic. It was fun doing. But what I'm trying to say is that, uh, you know, first of all, when I first moved to Texas, one of the biggest things that scared me was financial success in life. It really scared me. And I didn't want to get involved in all that nonsense I saw going on in the business world and the greed and the power structures and having to submit yourself to other people's egos and all that kind of nonsense. And I remember when Rudi asked me to go there, he said, build an ashram, and if you can build other ones, I was working at least 18 hours a day. I started meditation centers all over Texas. I was teaching in prisons. I was teaching in universities. I even, in fact, had an accredited course in meditation at a university in Dallas. And I was teaching in hospital. I mean, it was unbelievable what was going on. I was working 18 hours a day, plus running a business. And also, teaching 2 meditation classes a day at this center that was developing. And Rudi comes down there, and we're standing on the porch of my house, the house, and he says to me, "You're not working hard enough, Stuart." So I looked at him and I really started to laugh. I said, "Rudi, what should I do? Tell me what I should do." More. He said, "Buy that building." Now, Kim, the building was a shopping center that was right next to my house. And it was a strip mall. And I said to him, "Rudi, I have $600 to my name." He said to me, "Stuart, anyone can do it with money. And yeah, if you have $100 million, what's the big deal? You can just." So, a month later, I bought the shopping center. That teaching, anyone could do, I never forgot that. It taught me to overcome my fear of success financially in the world. It
Mm,
taught me how to deal with the world and to not lose my connection with spirit and to use that connection to give me the energy that I could successfully live in life. And at the same time, I can be detached from life and connected to spirit. That
mm,
I didn't have to be intimidated by the world, by the objective world. I can embrace it and let it be my teacher.
mm.
And I think this is an amazing thing that I learned and something people could learn. Everybody is, by the time they're 40 years old, they're like drained by all the tension of corporations and what they have to go through every day. And if they master their inner lives, they can learn how to deal with all this stuff and also sustain a connection. You know, I always kid around to my students. I said, I run an Exxon station. I said, cars come to fill up. They need gas to run. People come to these meditation classes because they need energy to run their lives. So it's like an Exxon station. You come here, and I said, Fords go to gas stations, Cadillacs go, Porsches go. They're all different cars, but they need the same energy in order to run. I said, every single one of you is unique. Every single one of you is a different person and has a unique creative life. All you need is the energy to run
Mm,
that. And you will find your creativity, your uniqueness, what you have to contribute to the world. If you connect with that energy, if you build that system inside that enables you to do it.
mm. Wow, that's so good. That's so good. And it's so true that there can be so many pressures in business, in life, so many pressures. And if you have a way to look at the world completely differently and look at life completely differently, then the pressure goes away,
Um,
right? Like the pressure of money, if that's your target is to make as much money as you can, it's a hollow target.
there's never enough.
There's never enough. You'll never achieve it. You'll never get there. Whereas if you have this inner peace, this that you've built inside and this connection with God, that then you're already successful.
You know,
Then the
they,
rest of it's just cake.
yeah, it's like you realize it's all transient, it's all Maya, it's all an illusion. Why am I afraid of it? Why do I have to sacrifice my life? I can do it and enjoy it and not
Right.
allow it to suck me dry.
Mm,
There's another story involved in this that we have time, okay?
sure.
Uh, when my teacher Rudi, in his life, became probably the biggest Asian art dealer in America. He had, just literally floors of antiques and, all kinds of crafts and stuff that he would get from Japan, from, India, from even New Guinea. He would travel and he would bring this stuff back. After he passed on, maybe 6 months later, his mother had taken over the gallery, and she and I were good friends, and she calls me up, "Stuart, how would you like to buy 2 truckloads of art from me?" So I said to her, "Ray, do you know where I live?" Where do you? I live in Denton, Texas. It's a Christian conservative town. They might crucify me here if I'm selling Buddhas and who am I going to do business with, you know? So she said, all right, think about it. So I thought about it for 10 minutes and I said, Stuart, I don't know where this is coming from, but this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, you know? And I called her back and I said, Ray, I'll do it. And she said to me, okay, you come to New York, we'll work it all out. I put myself in debt for something like $175,000. I had maybe $1,000 to my name at the time. I went to New York. This is funny. I went to New York and I went to her gallery, the gallery with Rudi's mother, and we spent literally, I don't know, almost a whole day together. And every item, the price was too high, she was fighting with me and arguing with me. It was a nightmare. And I said to her, Ray, look, I got to take a break. I left and I said, what's the point of doing this? Anyway, I went that evening. I was invited to teach a meditation class in a friend of mine's apartment in Manhattan. And in the middle of the class, Rudi came to me in the class. His astral soul, his soul force came to me. And he said to me, buy my mother a bottle of scotch. And he said it twice, buy my mother a bottle of scotch. So the next day I got up, I went to a liquor store and I knew she liked Chivas Regal. So I bought a bottle of Chivas Regal. I went down to the gallery. I walked in, I gave her the Ray, this is for you. I brought you a little gift. She gave me a hug. She gave me a kiss. And she said, yeah, and the price was everything was half what it was the day before. And a bottle of scotch got me into the Asian art business. And my teacher said, bring her a bottle of scotch. And she made me lunch. We spent the whole day together. We laughed. We had fun. It was incredible. It was incredible, and that's how life works. We have to kind of listen and say,
Mhm.
oh, well, it was just something I imagined. So I went and brought a bottle of scotch, and the Asian art business made it possible for me to get very successful financially in New York. A bottle of scotch.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and really it comes down to you listened.
Listen, and okay, well, this could be a fantasy. Let me try it. Let me see what happens. And it worked. It was God talking to me.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. I know a story, a woman who was a missionary and she wasn't having any success, what she considered success in the village she was working in. And somebody else came to town, like a traveling evangelist or something, and had tremendous success with the people there. Like the whole village changed in a matter of a couple weeks with this guy being there. And she went and asked him, well, what's your secret? Like, what are you doing different? I've been here for so long and nothing has changed. And now even the man who's the worst man, considered the worst man in the whole area, everybody's afraid of him. Even he is peaceful and loving and kind and all the good stuff. And what are you doing? And he said, I
Oh,
listen.
that's right.
And told her that's what you need to do. Just be quiet yourself and listen.
Listen.
And so she tried it. And she heard that she needed to bring her assistant, their secretary who was working for her, who they butted heads like crazy. She needed to bring her an egg. And she's like, oh my gosh, what a silly thing. Like, how can this be true? I'm so embarrassed. How am I going to bring her an egg? Like, what is it with that? What is that going to do? And she was questioning it. And then living in this open air place, a chicken flew in and laid an egg. And she thought, oh, well, I guess it's a sign. So she went to the woman's house and one of her kids was outdoors. And so she didn't want to give it to the woman. So she gave it to her son and said, bring this to your mom. Well, the next day, the woman came to work totally changed, like appearing different because she was so full of love and peace from that egg. And she said that changed everything for her, because she had enough food that day to feed her family and nothing left for her. And then this egg comes, and she cooked the egg, and she said it filled her like no meal has ever filled her. That just to open things up for her, like it was just great. And after that moment, they got along great, like everything over an egg. So you over a bottle of scotch. I
A
mean,
lot of
but
it.
it all comes down to listening. Just listen,
That's,
and you'll be
that's
amazed what you hear.
and honestly, Kim, if people would start listening to each other instead of everybody being right,
Mm.
everybody knowing better than everybody else, if they start listening to each other, all of this madness would stop. The wars would stop. People would understand, with $300 trillion, I could feed a whole country and not even feel it. I could help
Right.
people build lives for themselves instead of this endless greed and knowing better and doing all. It's listening. That is the key. People have
Mhm.
to learn to listen to each other. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in which I believe that's what love is patient. The old 2,000-year-old poem, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, etc. Well, the first one, love is patient. I believe that's what love is patient is giving your entire self to this moment, recognizing this is the most important moment of your life, this moment right here. So not be thinking of the past or rethinking of the future, but being 100% in this moment. That is showing love, that is patient. That is love.
Yes,
So yeah, and that is listening. And
yes, yes,
and
yes.
yeah,
Oh, it is certainly.
yeah,
Yeah,
changes everything.
I tell my students the exact same thing. There is no past. Past has died. The
Hmm.
future hasn't come yet. And the
Yeah.
future is today becoming tomorrow. If you do today well, tomorrow is going to be all right. If you start messing around with today, you're going to have a nightmare tomorrow. And
Oh,
if you live today with an open heart, tomorrow is going to be okay.
mm,
There's no tomorrow. It doesn't exist. And the
right.
past is dead. It's over.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
used to teach in prisons, in a prison it was a women's prison actually in near Oregon, Portland, Oregon. And the first thing I would tell inmates when they would come to my talks is, I don't care what you did in the past. I'm not interested. I'm only interested in what you want to become now, what you want to do with your life now. Do you want to be happy? Do you want to grow? Do you want to be open inside? Do you want to feel love inside yourself? And I would tell them this. I don't care what you did in the past. And I used to have I had murderers in my class. I had all kinds of really strange people. And I would tell them all the same thing. The past does not exist here.
Mm,
You know, the
mhm,
present exists, and you have to learn how to make you completely and totally alive in the present with an open heart, with love, and the future will take care of itself.
mm. Yeah.
I have a young woman who studies with me now, and I, I met her and I wrote a book. We wrote a book together called uh, From Darkness to Light. And it's a series of 160 letters that she and I wrote to each other while she was in prison. And this woman, she came out and her whole crime was exhumed. There's no more record of her having been in prison. She was working, she got jobs, she's doing fantastic.
Mm,
Talked to her the other day. She called me up. I said, you're like my daughter. And I just keep growing. I just enjoy seeing how far you've come in your life. When I first met her, boy, I tell you, it was a very strange person. But she stayed with it. She grew, and her life
mm.
is becoming
Wow.
remarkable.
Wow.
So I tell them that there's no past. The future will become what you make today.
Mm,
And exactly what you said, I agree with you so profoundly. And I think it's wonderful that your understanding really captures that. It's extraordinary.
mm. Yeah. Well, that's what you get when you dedicate a year to figuring out the true meaning of love, I guess. You get what you ask for.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh my gosh, Stuart, this has been so great. I could talk to you forever. But we are over time, not even just out of it, but over. But the time went by so quickly. Thank you so much for being here. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, there's a number of ways. I have my website, Stuart Perrin, StuartPerrin.com. Um, uh, my email is Stuart D as in David, Perrin at gmail.com. I'm now, believe it or not, I went on Instagram. I used to be on, I stopped it, but we started it again. So they can find me on Instagram, in a lot of ways, and I just published a book. I think if anybody wants to find out what I do, I just published a book. Here's a copy of it.
Mm.
You see? Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful cover. Yeah.
It's called Rudra Meditation, Transforming Life's Tensions into Joy and Love. This has been out maybe 2.5 months, this
Mm.
book. And if people really want to get a deep and profound insight into what I do and teach, I would suggest that they read this book. They can get it on Amazon. They can get it at Walmart. They can get it at Barnes and Noble, at any store that is connected, that uses Ingram Spark as a distributor. And most of them do use
Mm.
Ingram Spark as a distributor. They can get this book, and they will get a profound insight. It's clear, it's simple, it's written the way I talk, in a very clear, down-to-earth way. I don't use a lot of Sanskrit words and, highfalutin terminology, just
Yeah.
basic grounded words. So
Nice.
that's how they can get in touch with me.
All
And
right,
then
great.
last is I have classes on Zoom. I have 7 classes a week on Zoom. And there are two elements to this. The first one is people just have to get in touch with me. They send me an email, you're interested. I will set up a session, a Zoom session with them and one of my students. The student will show them the breathing exercise, and then I will send them invites to the meditation classes. So,
Mm.
so that's that's it's very easy. It's very
Yeah.
easy. I'm all over the place.
Yeah. Well, and we'll have everything in the show notes too, so people can get in touch with you. Stuart, this has just been a joy. It's a joy to know you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, Kim, maybe sometime in the future we can do it again. I think I would love it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would love it. We'll have to do that for sure. And
Okay.
thank you everybody for joining us. And if you know someone who would love this episode, pass it on. I can't think of anyone who wouldn't love this episode and love hearing Stuart. So pass it on. And I just want to say until we see each other again, I pray that you keep your heart open and you live your love loud.